divided, angry, and exhausted, but Americans can't exhale quite yet. Good evening, I'm Adrienne Arsenault.
And I'm Ian Hanomansing. For a fourth night, lots of vote counting, but no president-elect. Not yet. Tonight, words of conciliation from one of the contenders.
We may be opponents, but we're not enemies. We're Americans.
For whoever wins, the election has exposed the challenge, how to lead one country that's acting as two.
We love Trump! Trump every vote!
During a time of pandemic, economic anxiety, and racial tension, it is a tall order.
So let's find out just how close Americans are right now to learning who they've chosen to take this all on. This is a special edition of The National. American presidential democracy in action is testing even the most stoic. The wait has to be exhausting, but the trade-off should be worth it, being absolutely certain before declaring a winner, Trump or Biden. So tonight, our reporters are positioned to keep you right on top of things with the Biden campaign in Delaware and with the latest on the Trump campaign in Washington. Plus, those key states waiting to finish their role in this drama, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona. So as Joe Biden inched further ahead of Donald Trump in some critical states today, getting closer to winning this presidential race, but not quite there, the world watched and waited to see what he would do, what he would say to Americans. Well, late tonight, he finally spoke. Susan Ormiston is in Wilmington, Delaware, where that speech happened. So, Susan, what was his message?
Yeah, well, Biden delivered a very short speech to Americans tonight, late as you say, sounding very much like the message he would give were he the president-elect tonight. He's not, with no election call, no projected winner. He just went around that reality, and he spoke to the rancor that this election has underscored. 74 million voting for him, 70 million voting for Donald Trump, and he promised to work at undoing the rancor which has dominated the last 4 years.
We may be opponents, but we're not enemies. We're Americans. No matter who you voted for, I'm certain of one thing. The vast majority of almost 150 million Americans who voted, they want to get the vitriol out of our politics. We're certainly not going to agree on a lot of issues, but at least we can agree to be civil with one another. We have to put the anger and the demonization behind us.
So this speech happened very late tonight, and without the election being called. Why did he do it?
Well, to avoid the sense of there's some kind of vacuum of leadership, he needed to be on the public stage. He has every day since the election. He says he'll win. He believes that they have the right combination of votes to convince even the most cautious calculation, Adrienne. And he wants to put his imprint on this country as soon as possible, and also to signal to Donald Trump that he is governing in a way already, even as the votes are counted, and to reduce the temperature.
Look, we both know tensions are high. They can be high after a tough election, one like we've had. But we need to remember, we have to remain calm, patient, let the process work out.
He ended by saying, I hope I talk to you tomorrow, which I think everybody hopes that something happens tomorrow, moving this process along to an election call.
All right, Susan Ormiston in Wilmington, Delaware. Thank you, Susan. So a quick look at the count, which has not changed really in 48 hours. 253 Electoral College votes for Joe Biden, 214 for Donald Trump. So this is a race of really razor-thin margins, a long limbo of painstaking hand counts, and likely at least one recount. But the map is moving closer to resolution. Ian breaks it down for us.
So the number at the bottom of the screen hasn't moved in 48 hours, but I'll tell you a number that has moved, and that is leads in places like Pennsylvania. Every time we get new votes from this state, Joe Biden's lead over Donald Trump increases a little bit more. So much so, even the august New York Times is asking, Why aren't the U.S. networks declaring this for Biden, especially when you look at that trend line? And Biden's campaign manager says they're pretty sure that by the time all the votes are counted, there'll be a 100,000 vote lead for Biden. Here's the potential problem. Right now, the lead is 27,000 votes. There is a mandatory recount in Pennsylvania if the margin is less than 0.5%. So that's about 33,000 votes. So we're 6,000 votes away from that. Maybe if and when, and it seems like when, Biden surpasses that 33,000, maybe the networks will be ready to declare Biden the winner, because if he gets those 20 electoral votes, that pushes him over 270. There's another way he could do it, and let me quickly show you. He could win 2 of the 3 other states where he's leading tonight. So first of all, we'll go to Georgia. That one's really close within the recount margin. So that one might be a little tough, although he seems pretty confident he's going to win that one. Looks better in Nevada. And one more that's a little bit more iffy will go to Arizona, where the votes that have been counted in the last few hours have kind of shrunk that lead a little bit. But all Biden has to do is take Pennsylvania to win this. And people are wondering, why hasn't that call been made?
Indeed. Okay, so thank you for that. Let's talk about the calls for a moment, if we can. So why aren't they being made? Why hasn't CBC's counter moved? If you're watching Fox, it shows 264 for Biden because Fox has given Joe Biden Arizona, interestingly. What's happening there? Well, in the United States, there is no central, like Elections Canada version. There's no centralized body. So this is a journalistic endeavor. The Associated Press is in contact with every county clerk and precinct in the United States and gets access to all the voting data and then starts to do the math. So CBC is in partnership with the Associated Press. But every U.S. network has its own independent process. CBS, NBC, ABC, CNN, and Fox. They all have their own process. And they all make decisions based on their calls, which is why different networks are starting to do slightly different things. But at CBC, we're not going to do that. We will only make a call when 3 of the U.S. networks have a decision that aligns with the Associated Press. And why are we doing that? Because the point here is not to be fast. It has to be right. So that is the plan here. And Andrew, I'm curious what your sense is, because as Ian talks about the margins for recounts, we know it's talked about in one place, but it could happen elsewhere.
Yeah, so that's totally fair. And you know, to be clear, I mean, you know, pollsters and pundits, there are a lot of things they got wrong about the electoral outcome that we find ourselves in right now. But, you know, we should remember there is, at least in sort of one way, they got things very right. And, you know, when you think back, election night, okay, we knew that Republicans would find themselves appearing to have an edge on the night of the vote. But conversely, I mean, mail-in ballots, we knew that they would lean overwhelmingly in favor of Democrats, maybe in part because of COVID-19, maybe in part because Trump suggested to his own followers that mail-in ballots were inherently fraudulent in some way. And then consider that how sort of complicated a process mail-in ballots, the processing of them can be, because all of the mail-in ballots have to be checked against records, signatures, that sort of thing. And also, even if they're damaged in transit, they have to be sort of read and at times recreated in order to cast the ballot, even just logistically to fit it into the machine. And then you consider the fact that so many states weren't allowed by state law to process those mail-in ballots until Election Day, or until the hours just leading up to Election Day. It all adds up to the idea that, you know, the only question would be, all these days later, do Democrats have enough votes to exceed whatever margins it appears Trump was winning on Election Day? The answer has been yes in Michigan, yes in Wisconsin, you know, increasingly yes in Georgia, yes in Pennsylvania. So in a way, we are where we were expected to be, if that makes sense.
It doesn't make it feel any better. So however this election is going, however long it is taking, one man in particular is clearly not very happy with it, Donald Trump. Paul Hunter joins us from outside the White House.
And Donald Trump is somewhere inside that White House right now, Adrienne, and by all accounts, still in a kind of state of denial, angry, frustrated, pointing fingers, and all the while still falling further behind. Inside the White House tonight, the scene is described as increasingly frenzied and hopeless, with a growing sense this is over. Some staff said to be looking for new work. But all the while, with the president not accepting what's playing out on TV screens, digging in and determined to now fight this in court. In a statement from the White House, Donald Trump said today, "We will pursue this process through every aspect of the law. I will never give up fighting for you." Tonight, Trump tweeted, "Joe Biden should not wrongfully claim the office of the president. I could make that claim also. Legal proceedings are now just beginning." Indeed, last night he did make that claim.
If you count the legal votes, I easily win.
In a bizarre on-camera statement calling the election rigged, the system corrupt, Democrats out to get him, but offering no evidence on any of it. Today in Virginia, son Eric Trump and lawyer Rudy Giuliani emerged after meetings at Trump campaign headquarters.
Eric, what's the latest with the counts going on?
Amid signals the party intends to follow Trump's lead, without offering any evidence of any wrongdoing today, pushing to ensure
that any irregularities that have occurred, whether by malicious intent or incompetence, are fully investigated.
I'm going to stand with President Trump. If a Democrat were doing this, it'd be cheered on. And we're not going to let the media intimidate us into exploring whether or not these contests were fairly had.
Meanwhile, however, most legal experts dismiss Trump's claims.
Bombastic statements do not work in the recount and contest proceedings in states. There will be all sorts of legal conspiracy theories. But the president doesn't have many options.
Meanwhile, Adrienne, back inside the White House, reporting tonight that some of Trump's advisors are increasingly under pressure to maybe start to quietly nudge the president into accepting the one thing that he doesn't want to hear, to prepare himself to lose.
All right, Paul Hunter outside the White House tonight. Thank you, Paul.
And Steve D'Souza is watching the fight for Pennsylvania, where the vote count is underway in Philadelphia. And Stephen, what's happening there?
We're outside the convention center where the count is taking place, and this has been the site of a street festival that's gone on for about 12 hours today. Friends, co-workers, grassroots organizations, people who, after what they describe as 4 years of chaos, just wanted to let off some steam. Forget about the vote count, they just wanted a party.
After days and days of waiting, even the hint of victory had Democrats letting loose.
I feel good. The city is electric, and this is the most unified we've been in a long time.
They celebrated in the shadow of the convention center, where the vote count is tantalizingly close to giving Joe Biden Pennsylvania and the White House.
It's really cool that it's going to come down to Pennsylvania and Philly, and that we can really watch this happen.
Everybody knew that Donald Trump had to go. He has really split the country.
The only sobering note at this party, that so many in their state voted for Trump.
It's devastating. I mean, it's a moral loss, even if it's a political victory, and it shows that this country has a long way to go, but this is the first step.
4 steps forward.
A few meters away, with police keeping the sides apart,
Our way of life is being the beacon on the hill.
about 24 Trump supporters.
They're stealing our election, and they're undermining our democracy, right? And everybody can see it.
They're not partying, they're digging in.
We will drive this fight on until our president concedes. When our president concedes, his people will concede, because that's how we are. We follow him.
How far they'll go is scaring some people. Philadelphia police charged 2 men for carrying weapons near the vote counting center. Police say their intent wasn't immediately clear. Back at the party, a political world away, they say bridging the divide is the biggest challenge now.
I think that there has to be space to understand what about Trump is so appealing to him, is so appealing to them.
But not everyone thinks that's possible.
They are so bitter. I don't know if you're ever going to bring them back. They're very, very, very bitter.
So, Stephen, I love the fact I can ask you this question rather than have somebody ask me. When do you think we can see a solid tally of the vote in Pennsylvania?
You know, there are still tens of thousands of ballots left to be counted in Pennsylvania. These are the most difficult and time-consuming, so just here in Philadelphia alone, they say it could take several days. And, you know, those Trump supporters we heard from who said that they stand with the president and will cease if he concedes, I asked them, well, do they think the president will concede? They said, not on your life. That's why they love him.
Okay, Stephen, thank you. Now let's turn to the battle for Georgia. Its 16 electoral college votes would put Joe Biden within an inch of the White House, but things are getting complicated. Katie Simpson is in the capital, Atlanta, tonight.
Ian, counting will continue here into tomorrow, but an official result from Georgia is not expected until the end of the month. All of this work is going to be done again. A plan is in place for a recount in this race that is so close and so important.
The stakes are high and the emotions are high on all sides. We will not let those debates distract us from our work.
As the world waits for clarity, the one thing in all of this that is certain, Georgia, once a Republican stronghold, is now a competitive state.
There's been a demographic shift in our state. We are a more diverse state than we have been in the past several years. We're trending younger as a state.
Atlanta's mayor says she saw the change coming, and when she interviewed as a candidate to be Joe Biden's running mate, she repeatedly highlighted the shift.
I told him I thought that we could go blue, and in fact, I said it so much, someone on my team told me I should probably stop saying it to him because he'd think I was crazy. But I knew that we were trending blue in this state, and we're there.
Mayor Bottoms says the results are especially meaningful after the passing of Georgia's civil rights icon, John Lewis. A surge of voters in the county he represented helped Biden take the lead here.
I just think a lot of people just aren't putting up with what's been happening in the White House, and people want to change.
A rising star in the Democratic Party is also getting credit for the shift. After losing the 2018 race for governor, Stacey Abrams used her platform to bring attention to voter suppression and mobilized voters in huge numbers. Civic engagement activists say this is the start of a much bigger trend.
This election signifies in many ways that America is changing. That in the demographic of this country is pushing the country to change and be different. And the America that you see today will not be the America that you see 30 or 40 years from now.
If all of this wasn't enough pressure on voters and the election system, tonight it has been confirmed that the state's 2 Senate seats are headed for a runoff. What that means, voters here have to go to the polls again in January, and the outcome of those races could determine who controls the Senate. No pressure.
All right, Katie, we'll check in with you again a little later. So, Adrienne, that's a couple of key states, and you're going to take us to another.
Right, one more. We're going to go to Arizona. This is where Joe Biden is carrying it with a very narrow lead, one that's shrinking a little bit. David Common is in Phoenix. So, David, what's the latest there?
Well, Adrienne, another night, another protest outside the facility where the vote is once again being counted. And one thing that's become clear, talking to people, the Trump supporters who have maintained something of a vigil, a rally, a protest, insisting that there has been election fraud out here, is that they will only have confidence in the electoral results when and if the president says he believes the electoral results.
He won election night, and we all know that.
Results as published don't much matter to this crowd.
We need a recount.
While opinions vary widely between the flat earthers and the COVID disbelievers, one unifier is certainty that an election victory is being stolen, echoing the message from Trump himself.
Well, there's obviously voter fraud. I mean, there's evidence of voter fraud all over the country.
We release the spirit of Jesus in Georgia where they're trying to cheat President Donald Trump out of victory.
This is the ground level effect of Trump's words, even as the vote count continues here in Arizona. It comes down to trust, and many do not trust Democrats or election officials, and certainly not the media.
That you ask those critical questions.
This is from a nearly all maskless crowd. So where's it all heading? You don't have concerns necessarily that there would be violence or continued division?
I hope not. You know, I think we need to come together as Americans.
Now, adding some gasoline to all of this tonight, well-known conspiracy theorist from the far right, Alex Jones, appeared before this crowd, rallied them tonight, insisted there has been election fraud, ballots have been stolen, Republicans have been disenfranchised, that conservatives are essentially having this result stolen from them. That is the message from him and from many in this crowd. In terms of the actual count, which is ongoing, Biden continues with a lead, albeit quite narrow, here in Arizona.
All right, David Common in Phoenix. Thank you, David. And for more insight, let's go to someone who's covered many U.S. elections for CBC News, former Washington correspondent Keith Bogue, a great friend of the National. Nice to see you, Keith. So it appears to be trending towards a Biden victory. I think there's all sorts of asterisks on that. No one is there yet. But in the event that is the result, what would that victory feel like for Democrats?
Unsatisfying. Unsatisfying because, first of all, they believe that it's inevitable anyway, and they're suspicious of the media for not reporting it and calling it already, and they think that the media has sort of flopped for Donald Trump's threats. But what they're really seeing is dealing with is the disappointment from where they felt they were going to be now a week ago. In other words, they felt that they were talking about how many seats over 50 they were going to have in the Senate. They thought they were talking about growing their majority in the House of Representatives, and neither of those things happened. Now, they might still wind up winning the Senate majority, but that's clearly a much longer shot now than it appeared to be. And so you remember those debates that the party was having in the final couple of months or few weeks of the campaign about whether they should introduce what some would have considered radical reforms, such as should they stack the Supreme Court, or should they end the Senate filibuster so they could be more forceful in driving their own agenda through. Well, all of that's gone now. If they don't get the Senate, they don't get to do any of that. And so you're starting to see, particularly on social media, the factionalizing of the Democratic Party, recriminations. Whose fault is this? Why didn't we do better? And are we now facing a situation where our biggest concern is going to be the more mundane things, or what should be routine things, such as can President Joe Biden even get his cabinet confirmed in a Republican-controlled Senate? Much different conversation than they thought they were going to be having.
And they haven't even got the job yet.
And they haven't even got the job yet. No, disappointing.
All right.
It's going to be a little bit of a wet firecracker for many of them when it happens.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much, Keith. Hang tight. We will have you back with us in a bit. So we are watching for more results coming out of Pennsylvania, just one of the states where the ballot count continues this evening. We will have more analysis coming up. And the National will be right back. So you're looking at vote counting in Georgia, and it is right there, ballot by ballot, that a solid lead for Trump slowly turned into a surprise lead for Joe Biden. But out of about 5 million votes cast in the state, the margin of that lead is just thousands. So as we heard a little bit earlier, there will almost certainly be a recount in Georgia, but not just Georgia. Where else is this being considered?
Yeah, Georgia's a big one. Wisconsin is also one that we kind of knew well in advance because the Trump campaign signaled that this was a close enough race. The margin was about 20,000 where Biden was ahead of Trump. A state like Arizona, that's kind of an interesting one. The window for a recount to be allowed by state law is only about 0.1%. That's how many votes can separate the winner from the loser. And as it stands right now, I mean, the differential between Biden and Trump is in the tens of thousands, although that is shrinking. So it's possible for there to be a recount there. Pennsylvania is kind of an interesting case. And Ian, you were saying the lead that Biden has over Trump at the moment is in the ballpark of
27,000.
Okay, so
yeah.
27,000. And you were pointing out that the automatic recount would be triggered with a bit of a broader cushion.
Yeah, 0.5%. We're at 0.4% now.
Right.
So they're probably about 6,000 votes shy of that threshold.
Right. So the interesting thing about Pennsylvania state law is that even beyond that 0.5% threshold, there is a mechanism by which candidates can get a recount, but funny enough, they can't do it directly. So they can't actually say, I want a recount, and they'll be granted it. They have to go through ordinary voters and ask them to file for a recount. And through that kind of circuitous mechanism, they can actually get one.
That won't be messy at all.
No, and this is the longest civics class I've ever been in my life.
But it's, no matter how you slice it, it's not a fast process. And maybe most importantly, when the margins are as big as they are in a lot of these races, tens of thousands of votes, I mean, it is exceedingly rare to get anywhere close to that much of a change when you actually recount the ballots.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
And things have been so transparent, but Donald Trump seems to be hoping if he can't win at the ballot box, then maybe he can in the courtroom, asserting fraud without at least publicly citing evidence that he's used to launch various lawsuits. So for an assessment of all of this, here's Harvard Law School's Nicholas Stephanopoulos. And Nick, have you seen anything in these many lawsuits filed by the Republicans that shows any evidence of fraud?
No, I haven't. There are barely any allegations of fraud in the lawsuits. Most of the lawsuits are just alleging little technical errors or mistakes by isolated election officials. There's not even a claim of fraud in the vast majority of the filings.
Let me ask you about one of the cases in Pennsylvania where the Supreme Court of the United States has said, look, separate out some of the ballots in case later on we want to look at them and I guess potentially invalidate them. So it's not an allegation of fraud, but could that case have an impact on the result?
It could in theory. I think there are currently 5 justices on the court who are interested in potentially revisiting that case and maybe invalidating those late arrived ballots. The trouble is that there appear to be quite few late arriving ballots in Pennsylvania, hundreds, maybe into 4 digits if Republicans are lucky, but nowhere close to the margin that's likely to separate Biden from Trump. And so unless this case can be dispositive, I don't think the Supreme Court wants to get anywhere near it.
You teach young lawyers. I know this question may be more about politics than law, but why would all these lawsuits be filed with, as you pointed out a moment ago, no or virtually no evidence behind them?
Yeah, one possibility is that the Trump campaign just wants to raise dirt in the air. They want to create the appearance of impropriety in order to maybe deter networks from calling races or to sway public opinion that something has gone wrong in states around the country. Or the lawsuits could be placeholders. Maybe they're waiting to see if something big comes up. And if they do find some serious fraud or some serious problem, which is quite unlikely, they'll have a lawsuit already in motion that can then incorporate those findings. Those are 2 possibilities. Or maybe just Trump wants the appearance of litigation because it looks like he's doing everything he can to fight. So I think in the absence of any actual merits to the claims, those are some possible hypotheses about what might be going on.
It is sure nice to have your analysis. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Nicholas Stephanopoulos from Harvard Law School. So as the counting drags on, the people slogging through that crucial, meticulous work are essential workers. For their efforts, they've faced accusations of tampering and in some cases, even threats. We spoke with a longtime election worker who oversees a polling station in that key state of Pennsylvania.
My name is Adrienne Seltzer, and I've been a poll worker in Lower Merion for about 30 years now. This year's election, I believe, is different than all others because of the way that every subject, no matter how minute, has been politicized. Everything has put everyone on edge. There was so much misinformation, and to me, misinformation is voter suppression. We corrected a lot of misinformation at the satellite office when people were coming in, and knowing the correct procedure and everything was very reassuring to a lot of people. I love seeing my neighbors come to the polls. I love interacting with the other poll workers. And it's just so important for people to vote and have their voice heard.
Such a great idea to talk to her.
Yeah.
It was your idea.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, no, listen, I thought what we've all been talking about, I thought we should because there's so much noise, there's so much political noise at this level, and then you see those pictures of people in those visibility jackets, and they're just working hard because they believe in protecting the vote. They're essential workers.
And what a strange, surreal job that must feel like, right? And although maybe fitting for such a bizarre time.
And kudos to the Americans for allowing us to talk to people like that, and also to have cameras in and see the live vote counting, right? Like that, especially at this time. How important is it to see how that process is working? Like critically important. So as those votes keep getting counted, our U.S. panel is just ahead. Speaking of those pictures, take a look to help sort out what's happening tonight and what it means for getting this race to the finish line.
I know watching these vote tallies on TV moves very slow, and as slow as it goes, it can be numbing. But never forget, the tallies aren't just numbers. They represent votes and voters, men and women who exercise their fundamental right to have their voice heard.
So that was former Vice President Joe Biden speaking this evening, stopping short of declaring victory, but suggesting that is how he thinks the story will end. Meanwhile, the counting does continue. So let's look at the numbers. Joe Biden has 253 Electoral College votes. That is 17 shy of the 270 he needs to win. Donald Trump still at 214. And the numbers at the bottom of your screen there, that is the popular vote. So Joe Biden in the lead with that, 50.6% for Joe Biden, 47.7% for Donald Trump. What does that get you? We've said it before. At the moment, it's a bit like air mile points in a pandemic. It's good to have. It's not taking you anywhere. But really, if Joe Biden does win the presidency, that will at least, he will forever be able to say that the majority of Americans also voted for him, in addition to the Electoral College, but we are not there yet. So let's bring in Krish Omara-Vignarajah, who is a former official in the Obama administration, and Keith Bogue, our former CBC News Washington correspondent. So Keith, to you, let's talk about that speech. And let's talk, if we can, about how it might land with Donald Trump supporters who are growing increasingly frustrated. Is it your impression that anything in it could move them?
No. I think David Common had it right in his piece when he pointed out that what his supporters are waiting for is something from Donald Trump to tell them that it's over. And until that happens, well, we don't know what to expect. In terms of the speech itself, I thought that the point that David made earlier was the point of it, that, in spite of everything that's going on, he is treating the count as though it's an inevitability, and he's getting on with the work of the presidency, because we are in a unique set of circumstances here with the coronavirus. The coronavirus can't wait, or dealing with the coronavirus can't be put on the shelf for 70-some days. I think that the former Vice President Joe Biden wanted to tell people that this is on his mind, this is his priority, that he's not sitting around watching the vote count on television, that he's actually meeting with people that he knows he's going to need to formulate a plan. And I think it will be interesting to see in what ways he tries to move that plan forward before he is inaugurated, while still respecting the fact that there is only one president at a time in the United States.
So, Krish, I'm curious if that is why he spoke tonight. And just for some context, as he was speaking, Fox News was running a headline that says, unclear why Biden chooses to speak tonight. So how do you answer that question?
Well, I think the American people want to see their leaders out there after such an important week. President Trump had only one appearance this week, which is unusual given the record number of appearances across the country of both of these leaders. And so I think it was very important for the American people who hadn't heard from Vice President Biden for over 24 hours. With the election results trending as they are, he is, either inevitably or likely to become the president-elect. And I think it is really important for the American people to hear from him.
I'm curious about something, though, Keith. The way he delivered the message was obviously different, but it felt, as an observer, a little bit like he delved into some of the territory that Donald Trump did yesterday by saying, we will win this, we will win that. Neither gentleman has won anything, any of the states they claim to have won yet. Is there a risk in that?
Well, I think that he had to speak mindful of the fact of, or the comments that Donald Trump had made yesterday. Obviously, he doesn't want to get into a back and forth with Donald Trump about whether Trump is trying to undermine democracy or stir up a violent reaction of some sort against what's going on with the count. He doesn't want to do that, but he does want to reassure people that in a clear way that there is nothing wrong with what's going on right now, that the count is legitimate, that there is no fraud involved, and to suggest that or let people draw the conclusion and infer from what he says that the reaction of Donald Trump is really a reaction to the fact that he's not winning. It's not a reaction to any evidence that there's actual fraud going out there. But he couldn't, I believe he understands that he couldn't let a news cycle go by with what Donald Trump had said last night, just hanging in the air unchallenged with a more real narrative of what's really going on.
Right. And Krish, what does Biden do tomorrow if there is no result? He said, I'll talk to you tomorrow. What does he do?
Yeah, I mean, I think he is honest when he says that they are full steam ahead in terms of preparations. I think he's going to be meeting with his team, discussing personnel, talking about policy, talking about the nomination process. But I also think that he'll do what he said he was also doing yesterday, which is meeting with health experts, starting to kind of have that stakeholder engagement. And then he'll continue to figure out how he heals the nation. He knows that, in some ways people are talking about two Americas, whatever phrase you want to use. He knows that he will be governing a divided nation, and he will be potentially governing a divided Congress. And I think that's a lot of work that he has cut out for him. And so this is going to be, not downtime, but time in preparation.
Indeed. All right, Krish, Keith, thank you. You spent lots of time with us. It's not over yet. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
So everything we are talking about tonight, all about the battle for that building right there, the White House, of course, and who will be living in it. Come January 20th, we are watching every twist and turn, and The National is back in a moment.
Welcome back. White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows has COVID-19. A fierce defender of the U.S. president, Meadows raised eyebrows a couple of weeks ago when he said, quote, "We are not going to control the pandemic." He reportedly tested positive yesterday. 4 other White House aides are also infected. Well, back now to the story of the week, mesmerizing for so many in the United States, Canada, and really around the world. Chris Brown is watching from Moscow, where the drawn-out vote is a gift for Russia.
Today, of all days, was the day Vladimir Putin met with his top election official, flipping through a photo album of old Soviet elections. The U.S. claims practically every election in Russia, especially Putin's, are rigged. So for State TV, the chaotic end to the U.S. vote was a right-back-at-you moment. One show pulled out zombie graphics and showed them crawling across the set to suggest massive cheating and that even dead people voted, though there's no evidence of that. Guests feigned being scandalized as they borrowed Donald Trump's lines that the mail-in votes had to have been stolen because so many went Democratic. It was a propaganda goldmine on an incredibly sensitive issue here. Election fairness, including disqualifying opposition candidates, has been the trigger for large-scale street protests in Moscow and beyond.
Of course,
Notably, this analyst says there's been much less discussion about how a Biden presidency might address the deep freeze in relations.
the main task for Russian policy would be to try to decouple from the United States as much as possible.
Trump, of course, was clearly the Kremlin favorite, to the point that Russia hacked Democratic emails in the 2016 election. But now many Kremlin watchers feel Trump didn't deliver much, and Biden may be less unpredictable. On this day, though, smugness was the theme. This group of Russian pensioners who called themselves the Putin Detachment urged the world to reject the results of the sham U.S. election. Chris Brown, CBC News, Moscow.
When we come back, a look at Donald Trump's fraught relationship with the media and a press conference cut away moments after it started. That's next. Donald Trump's contentious relationship with the media reached a new level last night when several networks pulled away from his speech, a speech that was filled with claims of fraud without evidence. Thomas Dagla has more on the growing divide between the president and the press.
What a difference 5 years can make. From airing Donald Trump's unorthodox campaign launch in 2015 to now cutting off his rambling White House speech on unproven election fraud.
Election interference from big media.
We have to interrupt here because the president has made a number of false statements.
There's a lot to unpack here and a lot to fact check.
U.S. news networks sure have come a long way in their fraught relationship with America's best-known TV junkie and critic.
They said, this isn't news, this is propaganda. It's absolutely historic and unprecedented, but it's a moment that's been coming for a long time.
A president who rose to political prominence peddling the racist conspiracy theory that Barack Obama was born in Africa. It's no surprise this year he was found to be the single largest driver of COVID misinformation.
You are fake news.
Major newspapers framed the president's latest claims as baseless, and TV anchors, well,
we see him like an obese turtle on his back flailing in the hot sun.
Their takes from one cable network to another.
It's entirely possible now that someday soon the news media will decide to shut this election down.
Highlight the divided America already clear in the election results.
Hopefully we're going to be re-entering a fact-based universe here.
Trump also provided the ailing U.S. news industry with better ratings and sales. Both gave each other a boost. So there's no telling what it will mean for them if the one leaving is him. Thomas Dagg, CBC News, Toronto.
Next up, we'll look back at the week that was in this U.S. presidential election. Welcome back. And so behind me, the race as it stands tonight. Joe Biden still leading Donald Trump in Electoral College votes, but it is not over yet, so the waiting continues. It has been 3 days since Election Day, and what we've watched play out since then, south of the border, has had it all. Suspense, drama, confusion, accusations, outright lies. American democracy hanging in the balance. The world perched on the edge of its seat. So let's take a look back at the week that was.
Well, we warned you that it wasn't going to be an election night that you're used to, and guess what? This is not the election night that you're used to.
Look at that margin, basically 15 percentage points with 64% of the vote counted. But Adrienne, advance voting, mail-in ballots among the last to be tabulated.
I'm here to tell you tonight, we believe we're on track to win this election.
We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election.
An edge of your seat election night is now moving into a very uncertain early morning after.
This afternoon, the Trump campaign filed a lawsuit to stop the counting of ballots in Pennsylvania.
Tonight, Democrat Joe Biden pulling within striking distance of an electoral win as a handful of battleground states continue to count millions of votes.
Joe Biden is inching closer to taking the White House, and for Donald Trump, the path to victory is narrowing.
Who knows if somebody voted 10 times, 2 times?
How can they vote 10 times? How can they get 10 ballots?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Our goal here in Clark County is not to count fast. We want to make sure that we're being accurate.
We have no doubt that when the count is finished, Senator Harris and I will be declared the winners. So I ask everyone to stay calm, all the people to stay calm. The process is working.
Tonight from Donald Trump, defiance. Speaking to reporters at the White House with a list of grievances and Trump's rationale for why he's losing.
If you count the legal votes, I easily win. If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us.
In an election that has seen a record-breaking number of votes cast, the race to 270 enters its 4th day as the world watches and waits.
Is that really just 3 days?
It doesn't feel like it. No. Yeah, and I mean, I guess the great tragedy here is that the longer the outcome is uncertain, the riper the opportunity. I mean, we saw Trump speaking right there, right? For disinformation, for lies, for rumors to circulate. Stuff,
yeah, imagine that woman who believes that there are people out there who voted 10 times. She has no evidence, right? But if you feel that way, imagine how angry you'd be about what was going on. I was thinking, a month ago, years from now, we'll tell people about that year when people were wearing masks on the street. It'll also be that year when it took 4 or 5 or 10 days to find out who the next president of the United States will be.
That and murder hornets. That is the national for November the 6th. Is it the 6th?
It's the 6th,
Thank you for helping me out there. Oh, look, there's the White House. That's what everyone wants right now. Have a good night, everybody.